They say we should have known better than to fall so deep down into this rabbit hole we found. And I was thinking.
Hi, this is Nikolai, and you're listening to my dad, Rafal, co-host James Jardine, and featuring Mr. Jim Tiller on the one and only Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Plug in, listen up, and enjoy.
Deep into this pool of regrettable situations. Pitch black, think back to the last time that we were happy.
All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome down the Security Rabbit Hole to another edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. This is Raph. Here we are, and here we go. I think we're overdue for one of these episodes where we have a good sit down and rant. We've had a couple of these lately, and you guys like them. You download them a lot, and you listen to them a lot. So, whatever. Here we go. We're going to do this. I'm excited about this. We have, as I mentioned before, the three of us have an internal chat going, and every once in a while, like James is the king of getting up at like 6 a.m., reading LinkedIn, and then like 700 messages of his like appear. And by the time like noon rolls around and Jim and I get to it, we're like, holy crap, James has gone off the deep end again. But this one, I think this one's important, right? Because this is by the way, guys, totally unscripted. I just watched RSnake's House at Con closing keynote, and if you haven't seen it, I'll post a note. It's about why CVSS, CSEC, Kev, all those things are absolutely worthless in terms of like creating any kind of real value for security. And I literally watched most of that like this, and then just eventually like this, my head in my hands going, but we've known this for a bunch of years. How is it finally that somebody had to go run the math and go, none of this makes sense? We're not actually doing anything. And then, so that's a good one. That's my opening tally, I guess, for today. And I don't know, James posted this thing about I'm not going to see your thunder, James. You go ahead. You go, boy.
Why does this always start with James posted? Somebody else posted it. Actually, I was going through my typical news feeds in the morning, and I saw a post about Toys R Us Canada getting breached. And, per the typical security news stories, headlines, right? It's devastating. The world's ending. Any adjective you can think of to describe this as horrific. And then they come out and they're like, well, what was stolen was full names, mailing addresses, email addresses, and phone numbers. And, as we started chatting about it in our internal chat, it's like, have we kind of lost the narrative? What drives this? We have to report all this stuff as if it's the end of the world when it's not the end of the world. Because my take on it, when we sit there and talk about names, email addresses, for the most part, the biggest risk people have are like your domestic abuse victims, your WITSEC, your law enforcement, people that are trying to actually hide where they're located, right? Like that, they're for legit reasons, not just your normal 99%er that's sitting out there, that, oh my gosh, they got this. And, on the tail side of that, it's all horrific, but then we really can't tie it to anything specific outside of our default in the industry, which is, well, it could be used for social engineering. Right? Like every time we don't really have a good example of how we could exploit this, right? We could use it for phishing, right? It could make that more susceptible to phishing or more successful phishing rates. And it's like that, our go-to doesn't seem very much like a good go-to.
It's not compelling anymore. Like everybody's lost every piece of information that's ever mattered. Like the only thing I think I still care about is healthcare data. And well, that horse has repeatedly left the barn. The barn caught fire, burned down, and somebody shot and ate the horse. So like, I don't know what's going on, but James, I have a particular thorn in my shoe for like every time one of these like, oh no, It's 2.7 million attacks per day. Those report scans. Well, 700,000 people have had their information stolen. You mean the stuff that's available on yellowpages.com? Really? I don't know. It's like when everything is ultra secret, nothing is ultra secret, and then we've lost. Like this is like the title of this this episode is just. I think we just lost the plot. Like we just completely, we've gone out as an industry. We tried to make sense of the thing that we do. We didn't feel special enough. And so we created, again, I say it again, like a million times, create our own language, create our own way of talking, way of explaining things, talk down to people, and didn't play with the rest of the kids. And then 20 years in, we realized we're off by ourselves eating lunch in the corner of the lunchroom, and everybody kind of looks over at us and says, yeah, those are the weird kids. And they're like, whoa. And then we showed up and demanded a seat at the big kids table. We get it. And we get thrashed 6 ways from Sunday. And as Rob pointed out, like our metrics really aren't metrics, and none of that crap makes sense. And so here we are, nearly 30 years in for some of us, maybe a little more for some. And somehow we have to keep piling bad things on top of bad things to continually make, like the fact that we're desensitizing people are the people that really need to care. We're desensitizing them, or we already have, to a lot of the things that we've talked about. So we got to keep ratcheting up the crazy. And this is starting to feel like friggin' politics, where like every day you got to do something crazier than the day before, because otherwise nobody listens to you anymore. And this isn't going in a good place. It's not going in the right direction, kids.
It makes me think about the DNA of security in the early days was FUD. Fear, uncertainty, right? That was actually what caused the birth of pen testing, right? Think about it. Well, somebody could come in and take this. And of course, nobody would believe you. So you're like, okay, fine, I'll come in and steal it. See, I did this. And there's something about, I call it kind of like the school crossing guard kid version. Like, I don't know if it still happens, but there's always one kid who gets to wear the yellow stripe and it gets to be the boss for a day, and they really lean into it, kind of thing. Yeah. And I think there's a little bit of that. That's the next evolution of this, is we're just blowing everything out of proportion. Ironically, is that we're not paying attention to the really nasty stuff that's happening under the covers, but it's this whole sort of, you built a career. I think a lot of people are still building their careers and building new careers off of this sort of FUD factor. It's like, oh my God, look, this is a disaster, and pay attention to me because I'm waving my hands. I've got my yellow crossbar thing on. Pay attention to me. And in reality, it's doing nothing but bad, as you say, because it's distracting, it's numbing people. And the worst part is it's actually for nothing. Nobody cares because it is in the yellow book pages kind of thing. But I think I don't know how to get out of it, because everything, we were just talking just before you hit record, and, long story short is you'll look at something that may have been written a decade ago or talked about 15, 20 years ago. And it's still pertinent today. We're still fighting the same sort of organic issues. And it's like at some point, threats can move on, technology can move on, but we're still playing the same old violin. And a good, perfect example of that is this thing that James brought up. Perfect example of that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting pieces that I think about when I read through this. One, is it about the data, or is it about a trust relationship that we have, right? Like I share my data with XYZ company, right, to do business. The expectation is you're not going to go and then take that data and sell it off someplace else. You're not going to hand it over to, right? Like the trust of the fact that I give it to you as a custodian, you keep track of the data and you don't, just willy-nilly let anybody have access to it. And I think when we talk about the aspect of like your name, your address, your email address, a lot of those things, right? It's not this HIPAA related information, right? It's kind of that generic, it's from the phone book. Right. Whoop-de-doo. Right. And it becomes more of this. We've got this idea that it's like, oh my gosh, you've got a copy of my data and you can somehow use that to your advantage. Right. And for a lot of these things, it's out there a billion ways from Sunday. Are we really able to use that in any capacity, to be able to even attribute it back. We talked about this internally. I don't think we talked about this on a podcast yet, but the idea of, like the lawsuits and how much you get out of that stuff and what's your data really worth when it's stolen, right? And you look at some of these things where it's like, okay, well, on this lawsuit, if you can prove and attribute
there it is. If you can prove
this breach, then you can get up to X amount reimbursement, right? And so, especially when you start getting to the more generic data, right? Your name, your email address, trying to attribute that to any given breach is pretty hard when it's everywhere, right? Like you can get this anywhere. So I think some of it does come down to this idea that we've put so much effort into the trust in what you're doing with my data, or the custodial relationship, that we have lost sight of what's actually the big risk that sits out here for my data.
Do you think it's because there's a sense of general feeling of inadequacy and inability to do something about it? Do you sense that as part of it as well? Like, oh my God, my data's everywhere, can't do anything about it, so I got to find some way to rationalize it. So every time something comes up, if I bark at it, the problem will fix.
I don't think from a consumer standpoint I think most people don't care, right? I mean,
I would agree. I don't think anybody cares.
Oh, my name and email address got stolen again. Like, okay, whatever. I think the other side of it is the media side of it, right? And Raph, you and I kind of chatted about this. And we've talked about this in the podcast multiple times, right? It's the security vendor's marketing channel. How else do you get your name out there outside of commenting on articles, commenting on different things, finding the latest and greatest? Oh my gosh, I figured out this. And we have to prop everything up as if this is the most devastating thing, right? So now, I've got my name tied to it. This is how companies market. Mm-hmm. And we've incentivized that, right? To say, hey, look, if you want to get your brand out there, there's two ways to do it. You can market it through journal or like articles, or you can go speak at one of the 8 million cons every year to push your wares, right? And so I think that is more of a driver for why we see the stories about stuff that is not nearly as impactful as, wow, this is taking down critical infrastructure versus some people's names and email. The phone book just got stolen.
Yeah, listen, having been a part of that, like being, back in my HP days where the part of the job was to go become part of the public conversation, become part of the narrative of all these things. Like, and some of them was just absurd, which is like, I couldn't do it for that for so long. Because eventually you get asked to like, hey, your opinion should be X on topic Y. And you're like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Like, yeah, but that furthers our narrative, right? And some people can do that for a while, and some of us value the integrity of our opinions and sort of our own thought. And so we can only do it for a limited amount of time and in a limited scope. But I think that's you're right, James. Like the community lives for these incidents, for these things, so that it used to be you'd get 100 emails and say, well, if you had our tech, this wouldn't have happened to you. Are you sure you're safe? Right. And then the filters came on people, and the people that on the buying side got very allergic to that. So now it's more subtle. Now it's more, well, this company clearly didn't value your data because it's an identity thing, or it's a network thing, or the endpoint's very important. Like, and the pivot is you can see it in the way it's written, in the way it's conveyed. And I can't help but think that the echo chamber, you ever stand in one of those places where like you've got the dome roof over your head, and if you say something, it kind of reflects back at you. Well, to hear yourself or to hear the person next to you, your instinct is to speak louder, which then multiplies and drowns you out further. So you're screaming at the person 6 inches from you, and they can't hear you because it's so roaring loud. That's where we are in cyber. The echo chamber has gotten so loud. It is everybody's screaming over everybody else that nobody can hear each other, and how absolutely audaciously ridiculous some of us sound, or in general as a community that we start to sound. That I think we're coming with like it's gone around so far that we are actually getting, I think, to the point where like the quiet, sane voice in the audience, people start to pay attention to. Because like there's 900 idiots over here talking about how they've got the thing to solve it. That opinion's not saying that. What is that person doing? And I think that's where it's going.
I, in a weird way, I kind of hope, Raph, because what you're talking about is literally breaking the cycle.
Yeah.
Right. You're literally saying, like, how are we going to branch out of this? How are we going to become a little bit different in how we view the world around us? But the greatest counterforce to breaking it out, making the tail longer as the dragon keeps eating it kind of thing, is that the ecosystem of how you're valued as a security professional nowadays is how loud is your voice.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have to, because it takes a lot of energy. I don't know. It takes something that not everybody has, or maybe everybody it does have, they're just not using it to break that cycle. Mm-hmm. And so call it the echo chamber, the social media, the whole, everything that you're talking about is, I don't know, man, the forces at play that reward that type of behavior are really significant. To be able to sort of bark it out and get all the likes and all the stuff and all this kind of thing happening. And that raises your likes, your followers, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And that is a common.
But it does nothing for us except for stroke our ego and potentially make the investors that invest in our companies more money.
I think the one thing that we miss though, Ralph, is that there's context to each item, which is something we've been talking about so much more in the security, right? Like context of the vulnerabilities, context of security in your organization. Where's the context in the article, right? In this announcement that comes out to be able to say, like, take the Toys R Us as an example, right? To be able to sit there and say, hey, look, this could be a problem if you fall into one of these groups. But for the most part, this is not going to be a huge ordeal for you, right? But we don't do that. We do it as a blanket statement that, oh my gosh, we just lost a whole bunch of first names. It's devastating to the whole wide world. 99% of people look at it and be like, yeah, whatever, doesn't affect me, right? And then the few that do probably didn't even catch it anyway because we've trained everybody to look at it as if, oh, well, it must be everybody. And then you're like, wait a minute, this isn't anybody. This doesn't affect me. And then we toss it. Like, do we lose capability there because we're not putting context around that to not just say, yes, this information is what got breached. Yeah, there's a slim chance you might have some increased phishing capabilities because of this. But really, unless you're part of like this type of group where your address is super sensitive, probably not that big of a concern for you. Like, you can kind of pass this one up.
I think, James, you're really onto something here because I think what we're really saying, well, in my tiny little brain is there's just so much, oh my God, the world's ending and you got your information out there. But if you can imagine that if it was partnered at minimum with an ounce of realism, like, hey, this got out there. Here are the reasons that, could concern you. Here are the reasons that really should concern you, right? Here's some other things that, is this the end of the world? And I think maybe more people will listen. It's like, okay, does this really affect me? Because right now, I think a lot of people, to your point, don't pay attention to it because it's just so much noise now. So they're not so the people who could be affected are not taking action or whatever little they could or be prepared for it. So maybe that means things like phishing and spam work. Whereas we're really kind of, to Rav, your point, it's just we're all just listening to ourselves and not moving the ball down the field. I think we're missing that human sort of everyday person sort of interaction when it comes to it. I think your point's dead spot on, James. I think you don't have to worry about it because of these reasons, but hey, in this situation, these are some things you can think about it, contextualize it, and maybe say, give it, what does it mean to you as an example? But you don't see any of that out there. Just your email's out there. Oh my God, run out the door screaming,
Right. I mean, you see it sometimes, right? Like Oracle EBS has an issue. You're vulnerable if you've got this version, if you've got this, if this. Like otherwise, yeah, we don't have to worry about this. We're covered. Right. But you don't see that with like the breach announcements, right? You see it with vulnerabilities. You don't see it with data disclosure announcements to be able to say, hey, this is the type of data and here's the things that kind of match up. Not that I think anybody would care either way anyway, but just to the point, the fact that we just do it as a blanket. Everything is the sky is falling. So how do you know when that right time is to be like, oh, wait, no, maybe this is actually something I need to worry about?
Exactly. My favorite is the Oracle example. Actually, like everybody was coming out heavy. If you use Oracle, which is pretty much everybody on the planet, you're exposed right now. Blah blah blah. People are hacking as you talking to source. Everybody's hair goes on fire, and it's like, oh, but this. Oh, okay. Well, that'd have been helpful.
Suddenly we have Jim. That was the exact same thing as when Spectre Meltdown came out. Oh my gosh, the entire industry is going to be compromised. Every piece of IT kit, every server, every virtual machine. Oh, it's all going to be melted down. It's all going to be torn down. Attackers are going to get everything. Everything's gone. And years later, no practical, real things have ever come of that, short of a whole lot of hand waving. And maybe in some, targeted fashion, in some very, very limited threat model, by a nation state actor at a very targeted attack. Maybe it happened somewhere. Maybe it was utilized somewhere, but I'm going to bet it didn't. Something that complex with all that fanfare, all that hand waving, all those talking heads. And this just like, this makes Rob's, sorry, I'm shaking my desk. I'm smacking it now. Do not pound the table. But like, it makes Rob's Prezo on CVSS that much more relevant to me because we're chasing the solution to things that 9.5% of the time don't matter. Can you imagine the amount of money we're wasting in terms of technology, in terms of time, in terms of just sheer effort and people's, weekends, time with their kids, dinners, lunches, overnights? Like, we're patching things that are nobody's ever going to exploit. We're taking the time and political capital internally with our organizations to argue with people about why this system should go down. And we need to stop processing this critical thing because, oh my gosh, we're going to get potentially exploited, when the reality is that will probably never happen. And the maths that we're using are fake because they're based off of feelings rather than any significant data. And that, it was completely unintentional that I watched that this afternoon over lunch, but like, that has completely underscored this conversation for me. That is the perfect highlight for exactly how broken a lot of the things we do are, because it's feelings based. It's like Chicken Little with big feelings, and in a way that can scare everybody, but eventually people stop being scared and start asking hard questions. And all we can do is shout louder about how the sky is falling.
Yeah, we sold the could.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that was what we sold. We sold the could. I mean, anything that was out there could be an info finding. But 90% of our could is social engineering. Somebody could use this for social engineering, or somebody could do this. You remember how long we've had debates over, and I've heard very prominent people talk about this stuff, right? Like, oh, is one SQL injection worse or more risk than 8 SQL injections? And it's like, but where's the SQL injection? Like, is it a SQL injection in the admin portal that only one user has access to, or is it a SQL injection on the login screen? Because I will die on that hill that those have two very different risk vectors based on that. Right. But we don't, we've argued for so long to say, oh, no. I mean, if you have 1, you have 100, it doesn't matter. And it's like, it does kind of matter. Right. But we've always played that could. It could do. And listen, I was a pen tester for a long time. We did it. Everything we found, right? Anything you had to justify. Look, somebody could do this. And it's like, well, we did give you credentials, and we gave you multiple sets of credentials, and because you had 2 accounts, you were able to find, and none of our users would have 2 accounts. But it's like, but they could have this, right? And so that's what we sell. Like, the could drives the FUD, and that's why everything. So we have to patch everything, because that one thing that you missed could have been the way they got in. But we know cyber insurance tells us the key ways people are getting into systems, right? We know from these different reports, this is how it's done. That's why it doesn't matter that you've got 8 million vulnerabilities sitting in your backlog. What matters is the 3 that are publicly known that are currently being exploited that you are open to the internet vulnerable to get those things taken care of, right? Like Equifax, that vulnerability mattered.
Yeah.
It was also known to be exploited, right? Like it's not like it was a secret that they were going through scanning and exploiting that flaw that they got hit with, right? But I mean, it's a matter of we didn't know, we did know, and it took too long to patch for it.
Yeah. Well, it's because they were probably patching, James, that was probably because they were patching 600 other things that didn't matter. I think the interesting thing in Rob's Frizo was how many things we label critical that are not in the Kev system, right? That they're not known to be exploited, which is kind of a weird thing. And then how many things that are that are being actively exploited, how tiny that number is compared to the 300 some odd thousand vulnerabilities, and how big the backlog on some of these things is, and how easy it is for somebody, some vendor, some scoring entity to sit on something for 13 years in one case, I think he said, which is obscene, before it gets published and known. Like, there's just so many variables that skew our perception of reality, and then we further skew it to meet what our goals. Do you want a bigger budget? Well, you got all these critical things. You got to patch them because you're going to be like that next company that just got breached, when maybe those things are unrelated. I mean, I think Rob's advice was, if you try to have a conversation with your CFO about reducing risk based on CVSS scoring, you're effectively going to get laughed out of the building.
Yeah,
and
100%.
Right. And I think too many of us still do that. Not specific to CVS, but just like, okay, well, there's these 600 criticals we have. There's 7,000 criticals we have. We have this huge backlog of vulns. Anybody intelligent that even has the slightest idea of what we do will ask the question, who cares? Why is this relevant? Who is it relevant to? How long is it relevant for? And then the important question, so what? Because you can't patch all of them. And if you try, you spend too much money to do nothing. And sometimes you patch 10,000 things and you miss the one that's being exploited because it's not in your target list. And this game of whack-a-mole that we're playing, and like we talked about this, okay, is it a software quality issue? Is it a security issue? Like, why are we arguing over semantics? Is it so that we can get reads and likes and reposts rather than actually like addressing the issue at hand? Because in the time we've spent in this industry, I would argue we haven't improved much. Like, we're doing the same song and dance that I was doing on a, granted, much smaller scale in the late 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, into the 2000s, into now. The game has not changed. The job hasn't changed. We've added more technology. You've got cloud now the magic of AI, and MCP replaced, some other things, some other JSON or whatever the transport was at the time. Like, the methods have changed. The story is the same.
100%. As you're talking, what I keep picturing in my mind is this weird teeter-totter. Is I feel like in some ways the security industry is still playing the same record, right, from 20 years ago, the vulnerabilities, all this kind of stuff. And I can't tell if it's a reaction or an action or a cause or a result kind of thing. Maybe it's a combination, but it's almost like it's creating this noise. And so we focus on vulnerabilities. Like, that's where everybody spends all their time, when in fact, at the end of the day, that's not really the hard part. You know what I mean? But it's the part that people are focused on. Mm-hmm. But still at the same time, companies are just getting hacked worse and worse every day, kind of thing.
Right.
So I feel like in some senses that the security industry is just like, I think you said it earlier, just keep screaming louder and louder and louder, but not pushing the ball down the field. So everybody's like almost stuck in this cycle, and that cycle is reflecting outwards into the industry, other industries, real world business kind of stuff, and kind of going, what are we spending all this security on again? Right? My next CISO is going to spend another $4 million or $10 million in budget or whatever. It just seems like it's just refusing to move forward, and things that we're focused on are clearly not getting it done.
Well, that's because we're adding more walls around the playing field. Right. I mean, if you sit there and think about somebody like the compliance driver, Raph, your point about I got to patch all criticals. Well, half the reason people think they have to patch all criticals is because the clients are sitting there pushing at them and saying, hey, show me a pen test report. Show me this. Do you patch all your criticals? Do you do this? Right. Like all that stuff is blind because we're shifting the workload, right, to the patching efforts versus the triaging effort. So we're not sitting there spending the time to be able to say, hey, is this something that is actually a problem for me versus saying, hey, listen, we just got to patch all criticals because that's what our clients want to see. That's what we're asking of our vendors, right? We're not asking what are your vulnerabilities. All I want to know is, do you have zero critical vulnerabilities, right? We pull that context out of there, and it's just easier to say, no, just patch all criticals, patch all highs. That's all I care about, even though the time you're spending to do that really didn't move your needle much at all, right? Because it's these major ones. I patch those within 5 days, right? That moves my risk needle. I take these ones that are internal systems that have no access. There's no known exploitation. It's just somebody found a vulnerability in the code. But I could patch 1,000 of those. It moves my needle nowhere. Right. So the number of patches doesn't change how much you effectively reduce your risk because we don't do a good job quantifying the risk level per vulnerability out there. And, these tools have things that'll tell you. I mean, Nessus will sit there and tell you whether there's a known exploit, whether there's, Microsoft's reporting will tell you if there's known exploits. Bottom of the list. Let's start working on things that we know are a problem and let's handle those. And then we'll start, working through trying to figure out how do we get better. Does that mean we should not have good patching programs? Absolutely not. We should have good patching programs. But that should just be a part of business, right? Is doing good patching, doing good other things, keeping things up to date. Like that shouldn't be necessarily the security focus. That should be, hey, we have to maintain things.
Well, I think the part that you're explaining is dead on. It's about prioritization, and we can sit here and talk about risk and all that kind of stuff till the cows come home. But the fact is you move the needle fixing what people want to see you fix, not necessarily what could actually help your security. The scary part is we've been talking about, vulnerabilities a lot, right? That's kind of the theme. But I can tell you it exists in other branches of security, right? On how you may handle identity or how you may handle monitoring and blah, 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 all these other pieces, compliance, GRC, policy. And so it's about, I want to get this box checked, right? Now, getting that box checked solves some sort of thing that's been put in front of me that somebody's watching. And so we've kind of created this environment where thinking critically about security and risk while we talk about it is actually not being done. It's really not being done except in some, I believe, in some corners that used to be the sort of, crystal castle on the hill. So security professionals, we were always trying to push in that direction when you would run into a CISO or organization that had this really just outstanding security program. It wasn't about the checkbox. It was about here's how we're managing risk. Here's how we're managing our role within the business. And it was really inspiring. I mean, you can go back 20 years, 25, 30 years, and companies were doing that. And I feel like that's what we've lost is it's become, this is a better, security checklist. This is a better standard than this one. This is a better, STIG over here than this guy's STIG kind of thing. And it's just exhausting.
That all unravels, though, the second you get breached.
Second you what?
You get breached. Right, is you can have what anybody would call the most mature, best security program. You do everything the right way, not necessarily saying, hey, we get rid of all criticals, but hey, we're doing it this way. It's risk-based. We know the threats to our system. We're doing this. And again, security's always come down to it just takes one, right? It just takes one missed thing. And now all of a sudden your security program, that was the wrong way to do it. Now, not to say that was really the wrong way to do it, right? But that's the narrative that comes out is that, oh my gosh, I can't believe you didn't patch all criticals. You did this way. You still got that. Obviously wasn't the right way, right? even if you patch all criticals, you're going to get popped some other way. And they're like, I can't believe you didn't patch that low that you could have combined with a medium to make it into your system.
That's exactly right.
Like, no way is ever the right way. And I think we're buying into this idea. I hate it. I hear it all the time. It's like the old motorcycle mantra, right? Like there's two types of motorcycle riders: those that have been in a wreck and those that are going to be in a wreck. And we hear the same thing. Like there's people that have been breached, and there's people that don't know they've been breached.
Yeah,
right? Like silly things like that we sit there and promote.
So
like we're treating it that we're preempting that as saying you're going to get breached, which leads to our breach fatigue. It leads to the I'll do what I do. I'll collect my paycheck. We'll keep going because it's inevitable. I'm going to get breached, so I'll do what I can.
Yeah.
But do I want to put in that extra effort to do?
Or more importantly, I'm not going to like years ago. People say you don't get fired for buying IBM. You're not going to get fired if you do the CIS controls. I did them. We're perfect. We're great. Breach or not. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that's also what you're saying, James. But I get a little concerned when it's just a matter of racing to the bottom.
Yeah.
Control set, because we've released ourselves from having to critically think about these things. And that's, for me personally, that's the part that concerns me. Is
well, that's what we think about things, right? Like you're PCI compliant until you're not.
Yeah. Right.
You were compliant on the audit, but as soon as you got breached or something, like, oh, you obviously weren't compliant. Because if you were compliant, there's no way you could have been breached.
Yeah, I think this is a good point to end this. I don't have a solution. I'm not pretending I do, but we just keep saying we've got to do better. Like we just got to do better. Maybe what Rob Arsteig's talking about is the sane path forward, because maybe it starts at context and awareness of what we're dealing with and how we're dealing with it, and not just chasing arbitrary scored vulnerabilities based on what our vendors and what some third party that has no idea how our business is structured tells us. But I will flip that, and this is where this gets ugly, is how do you do that in an organization that isn't effectively staffed to do that? Like there's so many things that go wrong for us. But I think in where we are right now, I can tell you that there are very few things I'm certain about. This one I feel pretty certain about. This problem is our own making. We created this colossal shit show that we are currently living in. We continue to press forward in it. Look how many different versions of the CVSS there are. Look how many different risk management control set types there are. And look how many standards there are. Everybody creates their own. If you don't like it, make your own, and then somebody will fork yours, and then it'll just be their own version of yours, and everybody's is just slightly more better than yours because theirs is different. And I think nobody's got it. I mean, nobody's got it figured out. Nobody's got it figured out. If you've got somebody, if you know somebody, if you run a security program that's bulletproof, show me. It's like we used to say, like, oh, okay, well, I'll use a terrible example, the war on drugs, right? We've been in that for a long time. We've won nothing. Have we gained ground? Can you show me with some kind of statistics that don't feel made up? Right? Can you tell me that a particular action does anything when you don't know? It's easy to talk about how much you've improved when you don't know, when you only know the numerator and not the denominator. I'll leave it at that, right? Because we talk about we have reduced this much risk, but of how much? I've reduced we've taken all these vulnerabilities out of our platform. Out of how many? And sometimes it's I haven't been able to go find out. Sometimes is I don't have the time to find out. And sometimes is nobody knows. How many vulnerabilities are there in Microsoft Windows? I don't think anybody knows, because we find a different one every day. Same with Mac. Same with Linux. Same with a brand new one just came in bind, right? Arguably one of the most stable. Well, maybe not, but one of those things that's been around for a million years.
Well, every third-party component. right?
Every third-party component, every
put them in
piece
your
of software
system,
ever built.
They could all have vulnerabilities in them. You don't know until somebody finds it and tells you. But it's always been there, right?
I think that's it. I think that's my main point. Is now that I've kind of talked myself into a circle, I think we just don't know the denominator of this thing. We have a problem with no known denominator. So everybody guesses and tries to massage the numbers to make it look like they know, but they don't know. And as soon as some event happens, it exposes the fact that we have no idea. We all retreat back to, well, that one's uglier than mine, right? And you're like, well, but yours is still ugly. And we still haven't solved this thing. And if you've got a better idea, I want to hear it.
That's the fragility that I was referring to earlier, is that it's almost like, I want to say like hidden lie or something like that, but it's almost like something that we're not recognizing as a community, that we're just we're on thin ice that we can't see through. You know what I mean? We don't know that we're walking on thin ice. Maybe some of us do. Maybe some people are like Raph that see there is no denominator. I think there's a lot of people out there like that, but we're still forced into the conversation for some of us that know good and well that, okay, sure.
Right?
Oh,
yeah.
You know, okay, what the hell? So perfectly patched environment can be hacked tomorrow, easily, today, yesterday, you know, that kind of junk. So it's like, why are we putting our value on something that we know to be broken? And more importantly, the business doesn't give a shit, doesn't care, right?
Yep.
You know what I mean? They're like, okay, we have a bunch of vulnerabilities that you fix. Great. Check.
Yay. Anyway.
It's like the whole thing about getting scanned, or, you know, our firewall, we blocked 47 million scans today. It's like, what the hell?
Out of what? 10 billion?
It's so stupid. So is that good or bad? I don't know. Well, there's no denominator.
Well, Jim, it's the equivalent of the military saying, hey, we downed 7 rockets that are fired into our airspace today. And somebody goes, that's cool. And then eventually somebody goes, how many? Like, and if the answer is, well, we're not quite sure, then in real life, we wouldn't accept that. In security, we're like, well, I guess it's just a hard problem to solve.
Yeah. We don't know how many missiles were shot, but we know we knocked down 7.
Right.
And over here, the bad guy's like, man, we launched 700, man. Those
right. Ooh, those guys got nothing. Meanwhile, there was actually one that struck exactly the right target and killed the right person, and that's all they cared about.
Yep. Just that one person. Who cares?
Okay. Time to that's 42 minutes, I think, but that's probably too long. If you're still listening, it means you probably agree with this rant, or you too have been yelling at your device that you're listening to us on. Is that a weird glitch that didn't stream this out to YouTube? I was told that'll be interesting to try to figure that one out. But it'll get posted anyway, the usual way in a couple of weeks when this goes live. So, Jim, thanks for ranting along. James, as always, thanks for the inspiration, and like maybe settle down on the caffeine in the mornings. That's right, you don't drink coffee.
I don't. Yeah.
Good Lord. All right. Well,
that's just how I wake up, man. I just wake up.
God,
well, I wake up groggy until I open LinkedIn, and then that is my
the rage sets in. That's what Jim. That's what James is powered by. Rage, morning rage against LinkedIn. I do not open LinkedIn until I've had several cups of coffee. I'm at least halfway through my day because there's entirely too much shit that gets posted.
The best
in the
poster in the morning. I swear, like LinkedIn knows my methodology or something, because in the daytime I can look and it's nothing. But man, I see stuff at 6:00 in the morning or the weekend. Yeah, that's prime time.
It's got your number, James.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, you guys. I don't have the solution. I will post Arsenake's Asakon talk because it's awesome. It's depressing as hell, by the way. So just have a good drink in hand and just be ready to cry yourself to sleep. But if you find yourself not in a fetal position at the end of that talk, I'd like to hear how you rationalize your way out of it. But we'll do this again. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you guys another time, another place, on another Down the Security or Rabbit Hole podcast. See you guys. Bye-bye.
This is Bella. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave my dad a review and share this with your friends. Bye.